All right, you apes. Are you playing draft? Are you playing Outsiders Limited? Are you struggling with the fact that there is no dice to be rolled, no random chance, no 2 for 6s to be had? Is it just eating you from the inside? I mean, I know it was for me. That's until I found Uzuri. Come find out why Uzuri is the closest thing we're going to get to a brute in this set, and honestly why you should be playing her. She is kind of meta. But let's dive into it and figure out why Uzuri is even closer to being a brute than the massive, disgusting, green monstrosity that should have been a brute. I'll see you there. All right, I know what I said is a little bit of a stretch there, but it's actually true. She does have some similar tendencies to the way I play a lot of my Rhinar games. I mean, outside of like the Blood Rush Bellows turns or Scabskin turns, but a lot of value intrinsically baked into her kit. Cards that block 3, not my style of Rhinar is a lot different than, maybe your style, but that's my language. Blocking 3, doing 6 damage, right? So very similar. So let's dive into what really makes her tick, okay? So we'll start with her hero ability. Once per turn attack reaction, you may target a card on the combat chain with the keyword stealth, right? And you may swap it with a card from your hand, basically, right? So that means that I can play any old stealth attack right here, any old stealth attack. And then when my opponent is done defending, I can attack react, switch it with a card from my hand, play a 2 for 6, a 2 for 7, something along those lines, and eke in some free damage, okay? So that makes her very unpredictable to block against, which is great, right? Your opponent might overcommit to cards, they might undercommit to cards, and you have a lot of flexibility in what you can and can't do because, she also has access to the assassin card pool, which is huge, right? It's the largest one by far. So she has a little bit of advantage in limited next to like Arachne. And assassins have access to attack reactions outside of her hero ability too. So a lot of sneaky ways to kind of get that damage going, right? And almost every assassin card blocks for 3, right? Great. So let's move into her weapons, right? I mean, first glance, they're not a hammer, they're not a claw, small, puny damage. They don't look that great on paper, or at least when you first look at them. But actually, first-hand experience of a couple draft pods now and some pre-release weekends, this card is nuts, right? It just has so much value over the course of a game, especially in a format where we seem to be going to second and third cycle a lot, right? Spider's Bite does 1 damage. It costs 2. It has piercing, which means that equipment is basically invalidated against it in this set unless it's preventative. And it reduces the blocking power of cards when it hits, right? And there's several flavors here. We got Spider's Bite, which is the one you'll probably be playing with, and then a bunch of Majestics that were intentionally short printed. So these are going to be rare, but you might get one, okay? The only difference between each one of these weapons is what cards they affect on the blocking stage, right? Spider's Bite does attack actions, Nerve Scalpel does defense reactions, Orbital Class does non-attack actions, and Scale Peeler does equipment, which is probably the worst one by a huge amount in the limited and draft formats. I probably wouldn't even get this card. I'd let it go, right? So yeah, weapons are very good at fatiguing. If one of these hits, that means that when you swap in your hero ability, it makes it way more difficult to block. They might have to throw 3 cards to stop 6. Yeah, and she's really good at fatiguing. Just because of this hero ability and these daggers, you're kind of always threatening more damage than your opponent really wants to deal with. So you can fatigue your opponents quite easily. All right, so we now know what she does. We know what her tiny little weapons do. Let's go look at her stealth cards and what you should be looking for and shouldn't be looking for when you're going through your draft and limited process. All right, stealth cards. One of the keys to making Uzuri work at all, right? There's honestly 3 things you really want in a perfect Uzuri deck. You're going to want enough stealth cards to activate her hero ability. You're going to want cards to follow up on her hero ability, like 2 for 6s, 2 for 7s, 2 for 5s with an on hit, stuff like that. And then you're going to want a couple combat tricks to help you close these games, because this format seems to be very grindy going the second cycle, fatigue even, right? You need a couple ways to close the game. And there are a couple stealth cards that really stand out for her. And that would be mostly, in my opinion, number one, Isolate. Because of the dominate keyword here, this means that your follow-up ability is going to probably go through unprevented because they can only block with one card from hand. Then you swap it with your hero ability, send in a 2 for 6, 2 for 7, and boom, you've just done damage, right? And it's surprisingly hard to do damage in this format. Isolate is amazing. And what makes Uzuri unique is that we don't care what color it is, right? You play this blue Isolate Dominate, they can still only block with one card, and you switch it in for a 2 for 6. And while the Arachnes are fighting for all of these reds, we are pretty okay with grabbing a couple of these yellows and blues because they also go into feeding our daggers, right? Helps us with the end game poke of the dagger game plan, right? So Isolate in all colors, super high priority from my perspective. So high priority that I would take it over the Majestics, right? At least Infiltrate. Maybe not Shakedown, but I would take it over Infiltrate and Spreading Plague, right? Another surprisingly good stealth card is Anti-Prevention. There's so much prevention in this set. All of the equipment, a lot of the cards have prevention that this sometimes just wins the game with like an attack reaction, okay? Anti-prevention, anti-blocking, very, very good. The on-hit stealth cards, way less of, I'd say tier 2 of the stealth cards because, unless you're attack reacting this with one of our buffs, it doesn't do anything, right? We're going to swap it out. The on-hit doesn't really matter. It matters maybe towards the end of the game with like, we're threatening some combat tricks and stuff like that. But the on-hits, not so great. The priority of on-hits for me would be go Blood Rot, Frailty, and then Inertia. Inertia doesn't seem to be bringing me too much value in my testing so far, but a good Blood Rot towards the end of the game can really break the ebb and flow. And Frailty, just stops daggers, stops Kodachis, which is nice. And it lowers Rangers' overall damage by 1 or 2. So yeah, on hits, me, right? Stealth or Prowl here, pretty useless for us unless you swap in another stealth card, which is kind of below rate, right? Not very useful for us. And yeah, like I said, on hits, not so useful, right? All right, so now that we know which stealth cards are priorities, let's talk about how many you should need. You're going to honestly want at least 8, in my opinion, because that's about a 1 in 4 chance of pulling it out of 30. If you go in full pile mode, then you're probably going to want some more. But 8 stealth cards, 8 to 10 is probably your safety level because it'll allow you to have 1 stealth card per turn to consistently threaten our on hits and our hero ability, right? One good thing about her hero ability is that those cards go straight to the bottom of the deck, so they don't go to waste. It's just like if you pitched for a 2 for 6. So yeah, you want about 8 to 10, okay? So let's dive into the second most important part of Uzuri's game plan, and that is the follow-up attacks to your stealth openers, right? Now, obviously, this Majestic is far above, better than most of the cards you can get. So if you see this, take it. Very good. Any micro advantage in this format is worth it, and taking an entire card away is very, very, very good. Okay, so this is really, really good. All right, I think that one's pretty clear. Sneak Attack is another really interesting follow-up. This is the 2 for 7. Okay, if you've played or activated an attack reaction, this chain link, it gains +4. Right, so this is coming in for 7, 6, and 5. All 3 colors of this card are perfectly viable, to be honest, because even the blue, a blue for 5, very nice. Okay, we're talking each one of these colors is probably a decent choice to choose. Okay, so Shakedown, Sneak Attack, very, very good. Let's get into a couple more of the interesting decisions. We're going to be looking at the hybrid cards, and we're going to be looking at the generics. Okay, so what else would you want to swap in? Well, very high up on that list is Death Touch. This card slaps. Slaps in all colors, to be honest. The on hit here, very strong. comes in for 6 damage. You don't have to play it from your arsenal because you can ignore that part of the text with Uzuri's ability. So Death Touch straight comes in for 6. No need to play it from arsenal. 5 and 4. With an on hit of a Blood Rocks pot, that puts the value of this card all the way up to 8, right? 8 damage for free. Very, very good. Okay. Another card that's super high on our list would be Virulent Touch. I messed that one up. In all colors, actually, because again, when they block your first card, especially towards the end when we're both at like 3, 4, 2 life, right? If they overblock and then you just swap it in with a Virulent Touch, boom, Blood Rot. They have to deal with that on the next turn. You can pull tempo, you can pull ahead. You can do like a double dagger attack turn, right? This card, pitching these to the bottom, all colors, super, super useful for closing out a game. Nuts. Very, very good. I won a few games of this just from the tempo it pulled me alone. And then we get into the fun part, our generic 6s, right? Amnesia, it's kind of useful. Even in limited and draft, I wouldn't say it's very useful. It's 2 for 6 though. Comes in at that clean breakpoint over your 3. It can turn off Katsu and Benji's abilities, but that's okay. It's not that great. Same thing with Down and Dirty, right? You can technically defend with it from Arsenal, which is a micro advantage that I would take if I could, but it is swappable for 2 for 6. Gore Belching, this card's kind of nuts. Because of Uzuri's hero ability, this doesn't have a negative effect to it. So this is just a 7 when you swap it in with a stealth card. So if you find one of these, grab it, right? Humble. I actually lost the game in my last video because of this card. I actually thought it was a different one, so I didn't block it, turned off my hero ability, and I couldn't win the game. Humble is very good into Arachne, into Uzuri, into Riptide, into Azalea, basically into everybody, right? Turns off their text box. Clean way to grab an advantage. Useful in both colors here. Honestly, all 3 colors maybe, because it does come in at a breakpoint, even at blue. Infectious Host is a card I never actually got to play with so far. I haven't even seen one. But you can basically kind of swap in your tokens to your opponent, which is pretty sweet. One of my friends grabbed this card and had great use out of it, kind of similar to Virulent Touch, where it's just boom, swap it in. Here's a bunch of frailty tokens, right? Looking for Scrap is actually a card you don't want to swap in. We'll get into the generics that are just useful in general next, but not so good because it actually loses a bit of its power by swapping it in. But Wreak Havoc, again, very good card. Turns off defense reactions, breaks them in Arsenal if there is one there. Very nice. Just comes in for clean damage. Cut down the size. Is actually, in my opinion, basically blank. Because in this format, you're basically always having at least one card being blocked. So, there was not a single opportunity where this card would have done anything for me. I didn't see any of my opponents really keep all 4 of their cards. Even the ninjas didn't really do that. It's just too much risk, right? But it is 2 for 6. Destructive Deliberation is actually cracked, in my opinion. This card's cracked. If you play your Ponder tokens right, this card can generate you so much value over the course of a game. I love this card. I would run it in yellow and red. You're just getting chip damage in and getting a Ponder token, which means you could block more, which means you could dagger more. It means that you're getting more value out of your turns. This card's very, very strong. And then Freewheeling Renegades, it's kind of not that great, right? Because you're swapping this in, the 1 cost really doesn't make up for the fact that it's probably only coming in for 4. But if you have to run it, you can. Maybe there's one turn where you'll get to take advantage of this, but probably not. And then there's a couple interesting ones here, right? Like you could Rabble it. You could pop Rabble in. Then you don't have to pay the cost of the card. So it just does 5 go again. Granted, that's 2 cards for 5 go again. But in this format, that's not that bad. Seek Horizon, comes in for 4. And Spring Loaded, if you can manage to swap this in as the last card, comes in for 5. So it's okay, And that's a majority of the cards that you're going to be looking to swap in, right? The highlights for me are Virulent Touch, Death Touch, and her specialization, and obviously the backstab card, Sneak Attack, right? This card's very good. This card's very good. All right. So now that we've covered step 2 of Uzuri, let's go to the final step, and that is combat tricks. I'll see you there. All right. Final piece of the Uzuri drafting puzzle. We're looking at generics, combat tricks, and equipment. Okay. Now let's start with the combat tricks. In the assassin card pool, you have a couple attack reactions: Spike with Blood Rot, Frailty, Inertia. You have Razor's Edge here, and then you have a Majestic Spreading Plague. Probably hard to get this one. It is very powerful if you can find it, but very hard to get it. These cards honestly just give you a little bit more combat tricks, more danger throughout the game, but I didn't find them necessarily as powerful as I had originally thought. Okay. And that's because during the end, or towards the end of the game, when your opponent is already below 3 life, just playing a stealth card is enough for them to get them to start blocking with 2 cards, because they know that your hero ability exists. You're probably gonna send 6 damage. They have to block it, right? So when you attack react a stealth card, it only goes up +3. Same 6 threshold that we had before. So honestly, you'd have to get like 2 of these in a row to really go over. They are really good though, so don't pass them up. They are really good, and it's better that you have them than Arachne having them, to be honest. So they're still good, but the card that really stood out to me as quite dangerous in our toolkit is this one. This card's kind of wild. Towards the end of the game, your opponent cannot play around double blocking daggers. Like, they cannot, because if they double block a dagger and you send another one and then you send your 2 for 6, they're leaking, and they're leaking pretty badly, right? So I found that all 3 colors of short and sharp, very strong, right? They do a prevention on your dagger to save their last health. You just go 1 over. They spend a piece of equipment on it, you go 1 over, right? Or they use a 2 block, you go 1 over, right? And short and sharp red, obviously, this one just goes way over, very, very, very strong. So that's mostly it for the attack reactions, I would say. Let's jump into generics now, right? You have your prevention equipment here, or prevention cards here at the bottom. Peace of Mind, don't sleep on this card. I think it's really good. Really good. It's got a ponder token, which means that it's basically a 0 for 4, but a little delayed. Ponder tokens are very strong, stronger than I really anticipated. And with a prevention equipment, this card is going to block you 5 damage and give you a card back. Okay, really good. Brush Off, very useful for the got you heroes, Azalea when they're sending dominated attacks, stuff like that. It just lets you block more. And it helps with those like assassin attack reactions, ninja, like going wide, stuff like that, right? Lets you block from your arsenal. Interestingly, some of these buff cards come to fight. Scout the Periphery and Toxicity right here. They don't work the way you'd think with Uzuri's hero ability, right? Because they all say the next card you play. So when you play this and then a stealth card, that stealth card gets this +5, or if it hits 5. But when you swap it with Uzuri's hero ability, you played another card. So Toxicity doesn't carry over. Come to Fight doesn't carry over. Scout the Periphery, it doesn't come over. So these are still okay. They're pretty good. If you play, you pitch a blue, Come to Fight, and then you play a 2 for 6, that's a 2 for 9, 3 card 9. Pretty good in this format, but it will not buff your attack reaction hero ability. Keep that in mind. I made that mistake. Rabble and Seek Horizon are good ways for us to get Go Again. There's a ninja card that we'll talk about in a minute that's also falling into this Go Again category. Uzuri doesn't really have the ability to spend all 4 of her cards on your average turn unless you're double daggering, which isn't always like the most cost-effective way to do it. So Rabble and Seek Horizon are pretty golden. Just gives you a little bit more go wide turns, a little bit more threatening, a little bit even scarier for them to deal with, right? These cards are actually quite good. And Seek Horizon just is a combat chain ender if you have Go Again for 4. Pretty good. I think we skipped over Feisty Locals in the attack reaction section. This card closes out games really well. Even the yellow, comes in for a break point if they have to defend with a card. Red obviously is a good 1/2 swap out because if they defended, it comes in for 5. Very good. Looking for scrap, another one of those go again targets. Okay, if you have a blue stealth card that you blocked with, looking for scrap is activated and it comes in 1 for 5 go again, 1 for 4 go again. Honestly, this card's very good, very good. You get a couple of these go wide cards and you're looking pretty sharp, right? Premeditate. This one is usable with Uzuri's hero ability, right? The next time an attack action card hits a hero this turn, create a ponder token. So that will create your ponder token no matter what card you swap in. However, the next card you play from Arsenal does not work with a hero ability. So keep that in mind. Still, it's okay. It's not great, right? And then we're going to go into one of my favorite cards in the whole set. That will be Hurl. This card in all 3 colors is so dangerous, right? It's a 0 for 3 go again. We like go again, right? 0 for 3, 0 for 2, 0 for 1. But if you pay an additional resource, you can throw a dagger. And it just says when this attacks, it deals 1 damage. So unless your opponent has prevention equipment, Hurl will kill you at 1 no matter what. And if you have 2 of them, it'll kill you at 2 no matter what, right? Keep in mind it destroys the dagger, like flicked knives. But not only does it do the 1 damage, it also lowers their ability to defend this card. So this red Hurl can kind of come in for 2, or they're going to have to give you more than 1 card. Very strong closer. And then we have our Frailty, Inertia, and Bloodrot codexes. These cards are absolute gas. There's some crazy plays you can do with these, right? You can kind of get card advantage with these. You can kind of force your opponent to get a negative token, give yourself a ponder token. It's basically like playing a card for 2 cards worth of value. I would get these immediately. They're majestic. You're not really going to see them. If you see one, you have a pretty big advantage, to be honest. And that's it for, honestly, the cards that stood out to me in my drafting and limited experience. Equipment in this set is actually kind of interesting because there isn't very much of it. There's no free pieces of equipment. There's no token rarity equipment in this set. It's all common. And in my experience, hard to get. Okay. Seekers is very strong, especially when you pair it with the prevention cards down below. Fisticuffs just existing on the table means that at the end of the game, every single card you play has the possibility of leaking 1 damage, which is really hard for them to deal with. And then other than that, most of the cards are kind of average. Like Toxic Tips is pretty good. Block 1. Masks, both masks are pretty good, but they mostly block 1. Really, the only standout equipment in the entire set are the legendaries, obviously. And if you get a legendary, congratulations. But other than that, really just looking for the Seeker's equipment and like fisticuffs. All right, so now we can put it all together. Your typical draft pod, you're going to end up with something hopefully along the lines of this, right? You're going to have 8 to 10 or more stealth cards, 8 to 10 blues. I think 8's a pretty safe number, to be honest. Some follow-up cards, 2 for 6s, death touches, some combat tricks like Hurl, Verlew, and Touch. And then you're going to have a couple of, go wide, looking for scrap, Ravenous Rabble, Seek Horizon type cards. I can't express enough that traps are actually quite good in this format. DRX are quite good. And you always end up with a little bit of junk towards the end. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day.